We see incomplete repairs in our business, and this comes from an email that we got from bumpertobumperradio.com where someone was getting a strut warranted at, I think it was like 60,000 miles on the vehicle.
55,000 miles. It had some kind of delivery vehicle or something, and apparently the strut was under warranty. There was, a strut, everybody knows, I think. Struts are like shocks. They're in the front and back of the car. They're what helps hold the car up and dampen the ride. But yeah, one strut was bad, and that was under warranty. And they were going to replace the one strut. So the question was, should I replace one strut at a time, or does it make sense to do both struts? They will only replace one because only one is bad. So I'm assuming maybe it was blown out, like
the seal was
leaking or
leaking,
something like that.
Yeah, so and to your point, Matt, your answer was, well, would you just go buy one shoe? If you were a dog and you wore shoes, you could maybe buy two shoes at a time, which you wouldn't necessarily. Side to side, I like to see stuff replaced in pairs.
Sure.
And so if you have one brand new shoe and you got one shoe that's totally worn out or most of the way worn out, you're going to feel weird walking. It's just going to feel weird, and you're probably going to get a sore knee. That's the way.
Well, and not only that, but you think about this 55,000 miles. Well, 55,000 miles is a little premature for a strut, so I could see the consumer going, "Oh God, do I?" Kind of laboring over it because it is a little bit early. So let's say you don't do the one strut. Mm-hmm. Well, now this other strut that has 55,000, well, in 25,000 miles that'll have 80,000 on it, and I guarantee you, on this particular vehicle, that strut is shot. Yeah. So now what? Do you go replace one strut again? And then you're just in this evil, odd cycle, and we're not just talking about the replacement, but then you go back to the handling, the performance, the drivability of the vehicle.
I don't know. If I get in a panic stop, I don't want one new strut next to one strut that's, got 60,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
This is a stability issue to me. That's just my, the other place this comes up is in the body shop. Your car's in a collision on the right front. The right front strut gets damaged. Do we just replace the right front strut? In the car, in this case, it could have 80,000 miles on it. It could have 100,000 miles on it. And I'll tell you what, insurance companies never spend any more money than they have to fix your car. And so they're going to do just that one strut.
Well, and I've talked to Kevin at I-17 Collision about this, one of our bumper-to-bumper body shops. And I said, Kevin, why don't people do this? And I think for him in the body shop part of it, it's a little bit of a psychological thing. Because the consumer oftentimes either they screwed up and they caused the accident, and they definitely don't want to spend any more money, or they're pissed because somebody else ran into them, and everything is paid for. And sometimes that clouds their ability to kind of step back and make a judgment call and go, hey, that makes sense. Yeah. Let's do two struts, or let's do, whatever, pick your poison, whatever it is. Let's make this a thorough repair. And this is, when we talk about this, because we see cars come in that had been repaired at another shop maybe, and they're coming back, or we see competitive bids, and there's like really low, or we're thinking, why the heck they did all this work, and if they would have just replaced this
it would be a good
little
job.
Widget, it wouldn't be here today.
If I can do it wrong for $900 and do it right for $1,100, I'd rather do it for $1,100. And I think, because you got to understand as consumers, we all want to call people and give them, what they want to hear. But everyone's like, I just want to keep it as cheap as possible. And they people at my counter, that's what they say. Oh yeah, we don't want to spend any more money than have to. And we understand that. That makes sense. I wouldn't either. But when you come in from that frame of mind, it affects the service writer. So he's like, well, I got to keep it profitable for the company because we got to, and I've got to have integrity in my pricing and all that. But at the same time, the consumer, so he's trying to make a decision, and maybe we're going to do something less, where the job's not complete that you don't really know about as a consumer, but that's the price I think I want it.
Right, yeah, so they're unintentionally affecting the quality of the repair, or they're jading the advisor, so to speak.
And
He's nervous.
I literally had this situation in my shop this week. we did a computer on a guy's Jeep. His transmission wasn't working, so we did a computer for him. And he's driving down the road. He left, and we took it on 3 road tests, and everything was good. And he calls me up, and he says, Dave, the temperature gauge is running a little bit warm. He described it to me. I said, okay, well, let's just keep an eye on it, and let me know if anything changes. And then about 10 minutes later, he calls me back. He says, okay, the check engine light's on. I said, let's bring that thing back.
Time for a return.
It gets back to my shop, and we replaced the computer because of a transmission issue, and the water pump let loose when he left my shop. And so now his first repair was expensive, and I'm like, I got to talk to him about another repair. I already don't like to have to do this. Mm-hmm. And I say, it needs a water pump, and we should do the hoses, but the vehicle's 10 years old. The radiator's right there. We should probably do the radiator too. And he thought about it. He chewed on it for a little bit, and he said, yeah, let's do the radiator too. Because whether it's, I don't want to do this water pump and these hoses, and 6 months later his radiator goes bad because it's right there where it's going to happen.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we have you take a Toyota Tacoma pickup or a 4Runner. For us, doing the timing belt on that job, especially like the second time around, we take the radiator out, not because it has to come out. It just gives you more room to work. And so, yeah, in a case like that, this is why we want the customer to ask questions. And at the shop, too, we're also going to offer these things. Hey, we've got to take this out. Now we're talking about a $300 part. I can put in your old radiator, or we can put a new radiator in. But if I'm laying money out for a bet, I'd go 50-50 that this thing's going to go bad in the next 2 years. Yep. So if economically you're able to do it, and you're not on this tight budget, and you're going to keep the car, we need to think about doing these, making the repair that much better.
Well, the other place that this comes up too is that at auto shops we know everyone's price conscious. They don't want to spend any more than they have to, and it makes sense. But there's people that call around from shop to shop. Well, we want a radiator. How much is this? Or we want this. A timing belt's one of those examples I think of all the time. And I wonder if there's any consumers that have ever been baited into a shop to find out what they offered them on the phone wasn't what they ended up getting. So, an incomplete repair. And where I see this come up is on the timing belt. People call up, how much for your timing belt? Well, my timing belt's $350. And they call my shop and they say, how much for your timing belt? Well, it's $1,200.
Oh my God!
Why is yours $1,200? Somebody just told me $300. Yeah.
Rip off report.
And so, you've got I'll use a Honda Odyssey. You got a Honda Odyssey with 110,000 miles on it. You should be replacing the water pump. You should be doing, the tensioner for the timing belt, and there's a couple idlers and some other pieces in there. And if you do the job right, it may be, $900 to $1,100 job. If you do just the water pump a la carte, the time belt a la carte, yeah, you can get it done for $300. But here's what they do. They say $300, you take your car over maybe across town because the deal's so good.
Yeah,
right.
I'm saving $900.
I'm saving $900
from ripping me off.
Yeah, and you get over there and they call you up now that they got the timing cover off your car and things are apart, and they say, we're looking at the water pump and we see a little bit of coolant crust around it. We think you should do the water pump too, and now it's $1,100.
Right back to where you should have been in the first place.
Exactly. So sometimes as consumers, you guys can be your own worst enemy, and I don't want that to happen, because our point here on the show is to relieve stress and anxiety. And if you go into a situation where you think it's going to be one thing, to find out there's all these surprises and hidden costs and stuff like that, that creates stress, and maybe you can afford it, maybe you can't, because if you can't afford it, it's super stressful. So you really want to have, and I think that's why people are calling around for prices in the first place, is that's
all they know.
It's
a good barometer, I guess, to find out what field they're playing on.
But what they do is I think inevitably you can come up with the wrong answers and end up in the wrong situation, because quite frankly, it's really hard to get prices over the phone, and hardly ever is the information right. Somebody calls, oh, I need this, that, and the other. They come down, it's almost never this, that, and the other. They needed this, and this.
Right, so you're shopping around for the lowest price you can get
on something you don't need.
On something you think it might be, but you're not sure, but you want to get a price anyway, and you're going to use that to make a decision on where you take your car for what you think it might need, but it really doesn't.
So I think as a consumer, what you should be looking for, is in a shop, you want to look for stability. Have they been around a while? You want to look for things like, reputation. I mean, there's reviews and stuff out there. I mean, that's not always, it's a piece of information, but it's not always the whole story. Maybe the Better Business Bureau, you can look there to see if there's, a whole bunch of complaints or anything like that. And that kind of thing, but not necessarily as how much is your water pump versus how much is this shop's water pump when maybe you need something like a freeze plug that's next to the water pump.
I would, now that you brought up the reviews, I'm curious if there's any listeners out there. What weight do you put in reviews? Do people really sort out when you see this one? You go to my website, my Google page. There's somebody just ripping me a new one about this or that or the other. We screwed up their AC, and
when Matt ticks me off, I intentionally write bad reviews.
These guys are horrible. There's bad ones. So I wouldn't really pick a shop that had all perfect reviews. Something's wrong there. You know what I mean? Chances are. But do you really give these reviews a lot of weight where it's a 1 star and they're just ripping a new one to the shop?
It's a piece of information. It's a piece of information.
Yeah.
And so I do write reviews, I do just because, but I've learned if I got nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all, right?
Right.
So anyhow, when we come back, we're taking your phone calls at 602-277-5827. We can help you with your car, whether you got a noise or a vibration or a whatchamacallit, 602-277-5827. You listen to Matt and Dave on your Bumper to Bumper Car Guys.